Who are these people, and why do they pray here?
We feed it to the lamb. How do you get the leaven out the lamb? How do you get the leaven out the lamb?
Feed it to the lamb.
How do you get the leaven out the lamb?
Feed it to the lamb.
I first heard about the Tel Arad Hebrew Israelites in 2017. We decided to send our correspondent Shelby Weiner to cover their Passover ritual.
Nationalistically, it's identity. Who are the blacks scattered throughout North, South, Central America? What type? Who are they according to nationality? And the Bible teaches us this, that we are the Hebrew Israelites. Okay? And that's the most important thing, I would say, identity. Language is identity, nationality, language, and land. So that's why we're here now, to begin the process of rebuilding Mount Zion, all right? Because this is real Jerusalem, not that Jerusalem. This is real Jerusalem.
No one knows about Mount Zion, the true Mount Zion. No, basically, this land is desolate. So our land is waiting for us, our culture's waiting for us, and our law is waiting for us.
We have enough proof that this is the tabernacle of David. We have enough proof that Mount Olive is a couple meters away, and the next mountain, which was Solomon Temple, in this area.
Although the group was not very large, the responses we received for the news report we made were tremendous, with hundreds of thousands of views. So what do we have here? A group of African Americans who believe that Tel Arad is biblical Jerusalem. They worship this site, perform rituals in it 3 times a year, and connect it, in a way, to the salvation of the black people. Though it all sounded very obscure to me, I had to investigate this case. Tel Arad is considered one of the main archaeological sites in Israel. The place is divided to 2 sections: the lower city, with remains from the early Bronze Age, and the upper stage, with an impressive fortress, with some monuments stretching from the Iron Age to the Byzantine era. According to Dr. Yehuda Govrin, who excavated the site, the most significant chapter of Tel Arad is related to the story of the Israelite exile from Egypt, a story mentioned in the book of Numbers.
The city is mentioned in the Bible as the city that prevented the Israelites from conquering the land of Israel after they returned from Egypt and moved south following the spies. The book of Numbers tells us about a great defeat of the Israelites in their battle against the kingdom of Arad. After the failure in Arad, the Israelites are taking a vow to take over the place and to boycott it.
One example of how Tel Arad brings evidence to the biblical story, according to Dr. Govrin, is the tombstones located inside the Canaanite houses. Some of them were destroyed and reused as tables or other secondary uses.
According to the Bible, the Israelites came here, they were ordered to smash the tombs, and they left only one tomb standing. Other scholars say that this relic, which we found in the middle of the house, was actually a column that supported the walls. But I think that this was a tomb, which was used as an idol and used in every house. So according to this model, all the other rocks that we found in the middle of each house were idol tombs, which were used by every Canaanite family.
The other scholars Govrin refers to may shed light on a fierce battle between 2 schools of Israeli archaeology. On one side, the minimalist approach, which dismisses some of the stories of the Bible or says there's not enough physical evidence to support it. On the other side, the biblical approach, which backs the biblical story. And as Govrin represents, in a way, the traditional approach, his opponent is Professor Zev Herzog, excavated this site in the past together with prominent archaeologist Yochanan Aharoni.
There are questions which scholars debate. They are mostly chronological and political. When was the first phase of building military fortress at Arad? The second would be the religious reform, whether it was Hezekiah or whether it was not. Some believe that it was just a destruction, not a decided dismantling of the temple, but the destruction by enemy.
Herzog says that some of the finds in Tel Arad indicates that some of the Israelites who lived there worshipped other gods. This may overshadow the belief that the Israelites believed in one God and the cradle of monotheism came from the Exodus.
figurines, dozens or I would say even hundreds of figurines, clay figurines of many of women, usually attributed or assigned with Asherah, the goddess, which in some letters, as you may know, found not at Arad, but in other places, like Untitled Chapter, and they mention Yahweh and Asherato, Yahweh and his consort, Asherah, that there were a couple of gods worshipped in Judah at that time. This contradicting the monotheistic approach, which was probably developed later, but at that time it was probably part of the legitimate and very common cultic procedure.
The upper stage of Tel Arad is perhaps the most notable area in this site. The magnificent compound here consisting of a big fortress from the time of the Israelite period of the Iron Age.
We are talking about the era of the Kingdom of Judea. During that time, the kings of Judea established a series of fortresses in the Negev area, and Arad was the main one of them in the Beersheba Valley.
At the middle of the fortress, we see the Israelite shrine. It's indeed an impressive structure and a rare find from the Iron Age. At first, the researcher linked the shrine to King Solomon. Later, it was associated with King Hezekiah. One of the most interesting discoveries regarding this shrine found usage of cannabis for rituals. The shrine is now located at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem.
The shrine is a rather small shrine in the fortress of Tel Arad. It is located in one of the corners of the fortress. It is constructed of four main elements. First of all, an open courtyard. That in the courtyard was a big altar, sacrificial altar. Around the courtyard, or to the north of the courtyard, were storerooms, and the main hall was the third element. It was not a very large hall. It was surrounded by benches, and in the center and in the inner part of the hall was located a small niche, which is the Holy of Holies. On top of each altar, there is a small black heap of organic material. When it was excavated, when the shrine was excavated, or a bit later, during the 60s, these organic material were sampled and examined in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. We tested it again a year ago, and basically we found two different components on each altar. So we have, on the big altar, we have frankincense that was burnt on animal fat. The biggest surprise was, of course, the cannabis. Since cannabis is not, it was not originated in Israel or in the ancient Near East, we assume that it was brought from afar. We know that cannabis smell, when you burn it, it's not such a special smell that you can't produce from local plants that are growing in Israel, for example, sage. So we assume that cannabis was not brought to Israel or to Judah because of its smell or its aroma. It was brought because of its psychoactive effects.
So we learn that Tel Arad was a significant site during the biblical era. It's mentioned in the Bible several times, but what does it have to do with these folks?
David was right there. If you look at that mountain right there, you will see that David was right there, and he was first made king in Hebron. Hebron is right there. You see, so what David did, David came out of Hebron. The first act he did, he came out of Hebron down into this area surrounded by mountains, not on the top of the mountains, where Melchizedek Jerusalem up was, but an area surrounded by mountains. And he took a fort. And that fort that he took, it we're standing in today. And that became known as the Citadel of David. But David did something very unique. And all the archaeologists in Israel will tell you this. Where we're standing at right now is the first in history what is called a king's sanctuary.
In 2002, Hoshua Amariel came from Chicago, Illinois to Arad and decided that this is in fact biblical Jerusalem.
The actual Mount Zion.
They started a new spiritual community, which they called Beit Israel. The group performs rituals 3 times a year on the holidays of Sukkot, Passover, and Shavuot, known in the Jewish tradition as the 3 pilgrimage festivals. And the Israelites were commanded to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, but Beit Israel, they gave their own interpretation of these holidays. This, for example, is how the community celebrates its version of Sukkot, where, according to the Jewish tradition, Jews are supposed to build a sukkah, a booth with branches as a roof. But here the group decided to take this ritual one step further and to live in the wilderness for 7 days, right in front of Tel Arad, which they see as biblical Jerusalem.
This on my head is it's a fruit tree, it's a willow. And this represents our Sukkot when we're not at our Sukkot. So we wear this on our heads. Like right now, if I were to leave, I would still be in Sukkot mode because I have my Sukkot on.
Well, for tabernacles, we set up tents for 7 days where we reenact the steps of Abraham. So Abraham was the first to do tabernacles. Also, unfortunately, I don't have my wreath on my head, but he was the first to do the wreaths, which commemorate tabernacles when you're away from the tent. And so we like to set up around Zion, so we're in view of Zion.
Remember now, when the people came out of Egypt, they dwelled in booths for 40 years. They dwelled in tents for 40 years. The Sukkot branch that I showed you there was the branch that was used to hold up the tent, you see. So later on, it became a religious symbol where people did it in a religious format, you see. But this here, what we're doing here, has nothing to do with religion. This is a part of the heritage, you know, and the day of remembrance and the memorial of our people coming out of the land of Egypt.
On the Jewish holiday of Passover, marking, according to the Jewish faith, the exile of the Israelites out of Egypt, the group performs a sheep slaughter ritual.
The house of David and the children of Judah have returned to Mount Zion. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! And we call all of our people and the Jewish now to return and stand with us before Mount Zion, that we can bring peace to the world, a new world order, according to the Torah. Jews or Hebrew people ever found Mount Zion, that would start a new world order. So I have maps that prove and that show that this here is the actual area capital. We feed the Levit to the land.
This is not the first case of African Americans seeing themselves as the descendants of the ancient Israelites. Groups like the Commander Keepers in New York and the Church of God and Saints of Christ are only a few examples. What brings together these two issues? an African-American movement, and Judaism. Now, we sat down with Dr. Francine Markovitz, an anthropologist who has researched the issue for years.
From the very moments of enslaved Africans' exposure to Christianity, three aspects of the Bible really entranced them. The first we can say is that the figure of Jesus provided solace and provided an example for what we now call redemptive suffering. That is, in this world, you strive, you toil, you suffer, and then in the next world, if you're a good person and you have lived according to the rules of God, you will enter heaven. That brought a lot of solace, a moral answer for why are we going through this kind of pain, both through slavery and through the Jim Crow laws of horrible discrimination in the US. The second, and perhaps even more important aspect of the Bible were these biblical personages who showed a lot of strength, a lot of gumption, and brought forth the message that freedom is God's will, both in the stories of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, in the story of Noah, in the stories of David HaMelech, but more than anything, of course, the story of Exodus really captured early on Black people in America's religious fervor and social imagination, because it proved once and for all that God does not want slavery. Later on in the 19th century, one of the more obscure psalms from the Bible started to circulate with after emancipation and with a Protestant revival in the United States, and that, of course, is Psalm 68:31, which is, every African American knows this one: "Princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall soon stretch forth her hands unto God." And people read this as a message that Black people, that African people were not condemned to slavery, were not condemned to second-class citizenship, had a godly mission, a divine purpose, and would soon be stretching their hands out and taking leadership roles and living according to civilizations that were hardly recognized in white America and in white Europe. There are some much more radical Hebrew Israelite camps in the US, like the very radical group of Black Muslims who say that the white Jews stole Judaism from the Black Jews, that it was originally, again, an African and Afrocentric religion.
One question that comes to mind is, why didn't the so-called Black Hebrew Israelites convert to Judaism? Francine tries to explain.
There are Black Americans who have converted to Judaism, but many don't. And many don't because they feel that what they call white Jews are in control of those institutions and that they are not accepted as full-fledged members. That's one reason. Another reason is because they feel spiritually that they are indeed the descendants of the original Hebrew Israelites, and there's no reason to convert. Spiritually, they found their place, they have their own leaders, and they want to recognize Judaism as an African or an African-centric religion. So that, for example, the Hebrew Israelites of Dimona, they view Dimona as the second Jerusalem, metaphorically, in Northeast Africa.
One of the most famous Hebrew Israelite communities is not far from here. In the end of the 1960s, the group arrived here from Chicago, led by their spiritual leader, Ben Ami. He settled in the southern city of Dimona, a few kilometers from Arad. Just like Amariel and his followers, the Hebrew Israelites of Dimona also believe that they're descendants of the biblical tribes of Israel. Over the years, the Dimona Israelites had a complex relation with Israeli authorities. At first, the authorities in Israel refused to recognize them as citizens. Some saw them as missionaries. But later, some of them have settled their legal status. However, others are still considered illegal migrants in Israel and may face deportation.
Shalom, shalom, happy Corona. Hi, I'm Fran.
In December 2021, we decided to bring together Hoshua with Francine, who has researched the Dimona community.
We've been showing people a lot of information.
My impressions are that this is a tremendously creative and active and dynamic expression of various routes of African American, Christian, Jewish, Islamic modernity coming into contact. And it's also an expression of rejecting standard historical accounts and standard religious accounts while using pieces of each to bolster their claims. And as I was listening to Hoshua, I was thinking about the major kind of creation story of the Nation of Islam that was told about, a prehistory and the invention of the white man through the nefarious deeds of an evil scientist, Yaqub. So if that is a possibility, which I'm not saying it's not, but I'm certainly not saying that it is, why can't Tel Arad, that has a documented archaeological history dating back to the 8th century, and material remnants of being a worship center, why couldn't it have been the original Holy of Holies? I don't know. All that I can say is that it's given me a lot of food for thought for thinking about the development of these alternate movements. Artifacts were...
This bizarre idea of Tel Arad as biblical Jerusalem seems so far-fetched to me, I had to see if there's even the smallest chance that something so dramatic could actually have happened. There are many traces and evidence of the existence of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, but almost nothing from the first Jewish temple, a compound which was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, was left. So what indicates that Jerusalem was actually where we think it is now? Professor Yuval Gadot has excavated ancient Jerusalem for many years and certainly has solid thought that there's no other city.
We cannot know for sure. If you're speaking scientifically only, then we cannot know for sure. But there is no city in the Near East in all the ancient times that there wasn't a temple at the center. So having a temple is not such a big deal. You're thinking whether it's the only temple in Judah. This is a unique moment that people are not allowed to go to any temple they want. They have to come to only one temple, and this is like the temple representing the God and the royal family that he chose to represent him. That's the unique story about having a temple in Jerusalem. I can't argue with emotions and feelings. There is no need to go that far. There is a cultic space from the Iron Age in Tel Arad, okay? But there was cultic spaces everywhere. The unique thing that happens, if it happens really in reality, and that's the real debate that we should be, is whether they were able to centralize all religious actions to the Temple of Jerusalem.
Unfortunately, archaeological excavations on the Temple Mount, where the first and second Jewish temple were, according to traditions, are not allowed. The place is under the supervision of the Waqf, a Jordanian body in charge of the Muslim holy places. Dr. Tzachi Dvira is one of the few archaeologists who got the closest anyone can get to the treasures of the Temple Mount. For the last 2 decades, he's co-directed the Temple Mount Sifting Project.
We excavate Jerusalem and we examine the relics that were uncovered in Jerusalem. So first we know that the core of the city was in the city of David around the spring, the Gihon spring. And over there you can see fortifications even from the Middle Bronze Age, and there are in that area even evidence of occupation from the Chalcolithic age. And I'm speaking about 4,000 years BCE approximately. When we excavate in the area of the city of David, as we go uphill, the relics, the structures that are being uncovered become more and more monumental.
Dr. Dvira says there's no smoking gun to prove that the Second Holy Jewish Temple was indeed located in Jerusalem. But the massive discoveries, the ancient texts, and the continuation of their tradition are enough to support this theory. He does bring a rare item from the First Temple period, which may indicate the significance of Jerusalem at that time.
So we believe that this is an evidence of the temple treasury, maybe of the brother of Pashhur, the son of Immer. And his name was Itziliyahu. And this is the most, until today, maybe we'll have more in the future, the most direct archaeological evidence of the first temple.
Sounds pretty convincing, right? Well, not to our friend Hoshua. He keeps arguing that the temple in Tel Arad is the so-called Holy of Holies. And in recent years, he decided to take his struggle forward to the courts. In 2019, we documented the first attempt of Hoshua and his followers to sue the Israeli Nature and Parks Authorities, the body which owns and operates Tel Arad. Hoshua's claim was that the Nature and Parks Authorities are violating the Protection of Holy Places law by letting people and pets enter what they see as the Holy of Holies. The legal battle ended so far with no results.
Is that I have a court case. This is my court case that I took to the High Court of Israel. Right, you know, so because I took an Arabic lawyer, and what happened was I had a Jewish lawyer, a religious lawyer, and I had an Arabic lawyer. My Jewish religious lawyer, he was religious. He got to the point where the pressure on him became so great in the High Court as the years went on, he had to back out. Land people came to me first, and they said to me, Mr. Mariel, let's settle out of court. They said, we'll give you, and all I like to say, I always say $4 million. They offered me 4 million shekels. So then the judge called me into his chambers and said, Mr. Mariel, you have a landmark case. He said, but I just want to inform you, we're not going to give you the land of Israel. Right. We're not going to give you the land. I said, I want to appeal to our higher court of justice. I said, because the land of Israel doesn't belong to you or me. I said, I want to appeal to the higher court, which is the God, because the land of Israel actually belongs to him. And she said, what? And when she said what, she screamed in the court. She said, what? Everybody in the court shivered.
The Israel Nature and Parks Authority said in response, quote, we are not aware of any legal or financial discussion regarding Tel Arad. Tel Arad is a national park by law and is under the responsibility of the Nature and Parks Authority due to its public status, close quote. Hoshua threatened to appeal to the International Court in The Hague, but that's not the end of it. In December 2020, we had the chance to see Hoshua and some of his colleagues in a meeting they had with Dr. Law, a South African businessman.
You have Hanukkah, of course you know Christmas, and you have Hanukkah. And this is a celebration of the rebuilding of the house of God in the land. Okay. So here in the land, all over the world, Jews are celebrating this festival right now.
Attorney Daniel Taib, who represents Hoshua, told us about this meeting.
This businessman wants to build 300 green building units in Dimona, Yerucham, and also Arad. He's doing these kind of green buildings all over the world. The main target is the Hebrew Israelites of Dimona. This project is supposed to cost something like $12 billion. However, the whole project doesn't cost even half of what he proposed. So we talked about doing other side projects with the rest of the budget. And one of the projects we talked about was the Holy Temple.
Attorney Daniel Taib is an Orthodox Jew. We even met Rabbi Milubavitch once. However, he still represents Hoshua, a non-Jew, under rabbinical law. He also sees no contradiction between rebuilding the Third Temple in Arad and the biblical prophecy, which see the rebuilding of the Jewish temple on the Temple Mount.
We're not against anybody. We're not against the Torah or any other group. We want to enrich Judaism and the spiritual life in Israel. So there's no reason to resist our cause. It's like if you had a basketball court and you build another one, not instead of the old one, but in addition to it.
When we meet Hoshua in February 2021, he tells us more about his future plans.
This is the plan of the community that we hope to build around Tel Arad. Right now, when you look at this here, specifically, we're here, you can actually see within this plan here, the mikvah. The mikvah is right here. And that's actually built right in the plan around the village. And here we already have a religious village that's already been approved here. Let's go to this here. There's been a religious village here that's already been approved.
I almost lost all faith in Hoshua and his theories. One issue, however, continued to distract me. One of the things that inspires Hoshua and his followers is the so-called Arad Ostraka, a collection of dozens of ancient inscriptions found in Tel Arad by Professor Aharoni in the 1960s. Most of the inscriptions are written in the Paulo Hebrew language and are dated back to the late biblical era of the Iron Age.
A while ago, we decided to try to investigate the Arad Ostraka in methods that come from computer science and mathematics. Students who worked with us developed algorithms to compare handwritings. We were able to investigate about 16 of the Ostraka because we needed the Ostraka with enough letters. And when we looked very carefully into this, we discovered that they were probably composed by between 4, 5, 6 authors. So this is really interesting, if not surprising, because we are dealing with a God-forsaken place on the desert fringe, very few soldiers, and there we see that there is knowledge of the power of writing in the military administration. Not only that, when we look very carefully into the content of the letters which we investigated, we see that the knowledge of writing goes down the administration ladder of the Judahite military system, which means there is some sort of a commander perhaps sitting in Jerusalem or in Hebron, somewhere there, and then there is a commander, a very important person in the Beersheba Valley, and then you go down and you reach the quartermaster of the Arad storehouse, and even the second in line, the second in command of the storehouse. And this is really something mind-blowing.
Professor Finkelstein says his research shows us a high level of literacy during the Iron Age. But he said that the earliest scriptures found in Arad are from the 7th century CE, much later than the time of King David and the United Kingdom.
Once one goes into the nitty-gritty, which means into the details of the context of each ostrakon from Arad, it's, I think, quite easy to see that there is no evidence for this, real clear-cut evidence, and probably the Arad ostraka, almost all of them are from the 7th century BC, which means in the last century of the Kingdom of Judah.
The most interesting ostraka is called number 18. It says, "To my Lord Eliashib, may Jehovah inquire after your well-being, and now give to Shmaryahu a measure of flour. To the Kerosite you will give a measure of flour. And concerning the matter about which you command me, it is well. He is staying in the house of Jehovah." What does the house of God stand for? Does it refer to the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, or perhaps to the temple in Arad?
Well, there are different interpretations, because one possibility is to say that the reference is to the temple in Jerusalem, the house of the God of Israel in the temple of Jerusalem. However, we need to remember that there was a temple at Arad, and the temple at Arad was a temple to the God of Israel. So the question then is whether the temple at Arad was still active in the 7th century BC. In my opinion, the answer is negative. The answer is that the Arad temple was active only until the late 8th century and then disseminated, or at least part of it. So then the question, there's another question, whether there is really some sort of centralization of cult only in Jerusalem in the 7th century, in the late 7th century. This is a possibility. Before, not exactly. In the late 7th century, perhaps. So you see that the answer is complicated, and I really don't wish to give a verdict.
Hoshua also has his own take on the issue.
This specific site stands up above all because it has more than 3 artifacts that identifies this place as the house, as Bet Yehovah, the house of Jehovah. This is 3 artifacts. Now, and one of those artifacts actually says Jerusalem on it. You see, so those are actual artifacts that I translated personally because I'm the first person in history to translate what is called the ancient Hebrew word for word. On that specific artifact, it also says Jerusalem. You see, but they continue to promote these artifacts as letters. See, they promoting these artifacts as if they're parchments. You say, not astrocars. They're promoting them as if they're letters from some general, you know what I'm saying, and sending some type of supplies to a military fortress. And that's not the truth. These are astrocars, not parchment letters, and they're bowls that was filled with food that's sent specifically to this site because according to the Torah, you're supposed to send a 10% offering 3 times a year to the Kodesh HaKodeshim, to the holy priest, and the seal, the bowl of Zadok, was found only in this location.
The last time I saw Hoshua was November 2021, in the midst of the 4th wave of the coronavirus pandemic. He seemed determined to carry out his ambitious vision.
We have to have a new world order. We have to have, because mankind, we're getting to the point where this planet is becoming a very small place. We have to move outside of this planet. But we can't move outside this planet as nations. We have to move outside this planet as a united nation, as a united force. You see, that means we have to establish one world religion and a one world government. So in order for those things to happen, we have to grow as men. We have to mature as people. See, our weapons have matured and have grown and have become advanced, but the animal mankind is still a child. And because now we have increased and we have nuclear weapons and nuclear bombs that we can now destroy each other, but we ourselves as individuals haven't matured. So this is what we have to mature, and all of the religions have failed us. And this is the part of why we're here. See, in the Torah, it says that the new world order will come from Mount Zion. You see, and that it will get to the point where it says that the people will beat their swords into pruning shears, and their spears into pruning. It says nation. It doesn't say religion. It said nation will not lift up sword against nation. Neither will they learn war anymore. You see, so that's gonna happen, that we feel, not from a religious revolution, but from a social revolution.
Hoshua and the Beit Israel community continue their tradition and rituals, as well as their disputes with authorities. And as for me, I ended this fascinating journey with more questions than when I started it. But perhaps the question of where biblical Jerusalem is doesn't really matter, as other questions arise. Hoshua and his followers may look obscure, and his theories sound far-fetched. But so did many other spiritual movements in history. Could this be another insignificant movement, or the beginning of a new major movement in the Holy Land?